Many drivers are clearly struggling to pay for these higher gas prices, and they are not going to like one new idea coming out of Washington. The government is looking at a proposal to tax people based on how many miles they drive. Now, this is just an early draft, and the White House is looking at it, but it's already upsetting our next guest. Jim Gilmore is former governor of Virginia and CEO of the Free Congress Foundation. Governor, great of you to be here. You know what? If we can't really come up with the gas taxes we have with enough money to pay to cover maintenance of our roads, we got to come up with something, don't we?
Well, we do, but this sure ain't it. This is the dumbest thing I've heard. And I hang around Washington a lot, and so that's saying something. This is really, really a bad idea. Can you imagine putting meters in people's cars and charging them per mile? You know, when you're trying to have a recovery, then you're going to add more taxes right now on just regular people, regular working people who have to get to work. And besides, who wants the government knowing where you're going anyway and discouraging you from traveling? It's just the worst idea I've heard in a long time.
Well, the other ideas to come up with money for infrastructure spending and the maintenance of our roads would be a higher federal gas tax, which we haven't raised since the mid-90s. It's only 18.4 cents per gallon. You could have more tolls. You could have congestion pricing. But anything that you do to get people to pay more for how much they drive, they go bananas. So I'm saying, will it ever happen? Will we ever be able to raise more revenue to cover road maintenance?
Well, we at Free Congress Foundation, freecongress.org, actually have a transportation center, and we're looking at all these alternatives, and we know that you've got to have better infrastructure in order to get our economy moving again. But this certainly isn't it. There are a lot of other ways you can go, but adding more taxes when we're trying to do a recovery is not a good idea. You could get into general appropriations. If transportation is important, then we ought to put our money where our mouth is. We could do a lot more public-private partnerships. There are a lot of approaches that you can take to really improve transportation. We need an overall plan for this country, which I don't think we really have right now. So there are a lot of good things that we could do, and we're thinking about them at Free Congress. But putting a tax on a per-mile road travel on people discourages travel. It says that people can't move in a free society. It's going to be bad for people trying to get to and from work. It's a regressive tax. It's a terrible idea. We shouldn't be doing it.
But the people in D.C. are maybe rightly looking at, if you have more people driving electric cars in the future, and this is just even in the nascent stages, you have to think about how you are going to get those people to pay to drive, essentially, if they're not filling up their tanks with gasoline.
That's why the gas tax isn't necessarily a good way to pay for transportation, because you're right. The whole goal here is to increase the efficiency even in gas cars, much less electric cars. And if they're going to be buying fewer gallons, which I think is a national policy, then you get less gas tax. So, I mean, I think you got to put transportation up on the table along with everything else in the society, and make some priority decisions about how we're going to spend our money. But the key thing right now is to get this economy moving again, get people back employed, build up the economy, create some more revenue.
But you have to figure out a way to make the people who actually use the roads pay. And there was analysis done by USA Today last year that based on the per 1,000 miles driven, Americans are paying the less than ever at the pump for the upkeep of the nation's roads.
Yeah, and that's probably it's good if we can have people at liberty to move around this country without having to charge them additional money. But look, we're not unrealistic about this. You've got to have some additional revenue to build a modern infrastructure and a modern transportation society. And we're talking about that on our webpage at freecongress.org. But this is not it, because this gets into a real discouragement of people moving around. That's not America.
Governor, great to see you. Thank you, sir. Governor Jim Gilmore.